Well, hey, rail fans and model railroaders. Welcome back to another episode of Getting Back on Track with Steve
and Roxy. So we've been doing all this work on our mountain. We got our portals installed, and we tried out our camera car and learned that the camera car sits just a little too high to fit through the portals.
So we saw this as a perfect opportunity to be able to show you guys how we're going to redesign this car to fit. So we'll take you through the steps from the design process to slicing to 3D printing, and then we'll run this thing around the loop again for you. So with that being said, let's get this work done.
To start off, we open the original camera car STL that we created in Video 44. Tinkercad has been great because it's been so easy to learn. The tutorials are helpful, and you can just manipulate the shapes until you're happy with the results. This time, we'd like to print the car all in one piece. So we're shortening the shape to fit through our new tunnel. We'll need to make a piece for the middle to hold the shortened top. We'll take this cube and resize it to fit in the middle of our build. Once that's done, we can cut down the top. Then we'll put all the pieces together and tell Tinkercad to make them all one shape. Next, we'll save the STL and send it over to Dad to be sliced and printed.
So here we are at our slicer program. We're going to import the STL file. I'm using Cura. The first thing we want to do is we want to select our print quality. So the standard quality is for average detailed prints, and it sets most of these parameters for the layer heights, which is a higher value, gives us a faster prints but lower resolution. It also affects the walls and the top and bottom layers. So when you select standard quality, it presets all of these parameters. The next parameter we want to look at is the infill. So we want to use only 10% infill density. We want to use the lightning infill pattern because it allows us to print fastest and it uses less material. For print temperature, I've found that 220 Celsius and 70 degrees for the bed temp works best for my PLA with my printer. So here we want to enable the Z-hop and enable retraction, and this is helpful when you're printing tall things that have very narrow base, because with that you can take and you can ensure that the nozzle doesn't hit the parts and knock them over, which I've run into a lot. And with the retraction, the machine will retract the filament slightly as it moves, and that'll eliminate some of the stringing you'll get. And the Z-hop actually makes the bed drop and then return to the position. So every time it moves, it drops and you don't accidentally clip the structure you're building and knock it over. Our next thing to look at is the fan speed. So we want to have the cooling fan on, because with the cooling fan on, it improves the print quality on the layers, and especially with short layer times and bridging and overhangs. For support, I like to use the tree support, and I set it for everywhere. And I like this support because they come off really easily and take less problems when you're trying to pull them off and don't do any kind of damage to the print. So then we're going to look at our build plate adhesion. So you'll want to at least do a skirt, because what that does is it makes a circular pattern around the perimeter of what you're printing, but it starts the flow of the filament out of the nozzle, out of the hot end. There's different kinds of support you can use. So the skirt we just talked about. The next is a brim, and think of that as like a hat brim to where it puts a line of filament all the way around and around and around and works its way into where the base is that you're going to print up from. So it's like a hat brim. The next one is a raft. Now, raft is really helpful because it'll do a complete area of filament, and then you'll build your print on top of that. So it's a raft and a section of filament that's between the item you're printing and the bed. And what that does, especially with things that have a very small base area on the bed and that is very tall, that addition of the raft will help stabilize it and keep it from getting knocked over, and you can print really tall stuff. So once we're done with all the parameters, we just hit the slice. The machine will go layer by layer by layer, determining all the parameters and everything that needs to happen, and is creating a program that will tell the printer exactly how to build this part. This usually doesn't take very long depending on the complexity. So here it shows it'll take 7 hours and 11 minutes. And you can see in the parameter here, it shows me exactly how much filament I'll use, which is 55 grams. And based on what I paid for a spool, it tells me that this part will cost me $1.08 to go ahead and print. So now once we have this information, we can go over and we can preview, and you can see in this view, it shows all of the trees for support and what this will look like when it's actually printing. You can take and you can move the scale here, and you can go through layer by layer and see how the print goes. I don't know how necessary this is, but it's really cool to watch. So now we're going to go ahead and save it to disk. So now we take our printer and we get it fired up. We stick our SD card in, and off it goes. And you can see how the trees are mounted up in there. You can really see how everything's coming together. These supports come off really easily. So here Roxy is going to go ahead and do the post operations on the print. And this is just removal of all of the supports. Most of them just snap right off, but you can use needle nose to work on pulling them out of there. The only surfaces that we really have to make sure are really clean is the areas where it's going to rest on the actual gondola. So here our camera fits perfectly. So here we can see it's still a little too tall. So Roxy will get back into our regular file, and she can use Tinkercad to go ahead and cut this down. So she's going to shave off the whole bottom section, and then she's going to cut the upper support for the camera just a little bit. And this should all just ride in the gondola just fine and should fit through our tunnel portals. So now we'll just run that through the slicer, and we've already shown you how that works. But it cut the time about in half of what it takes to print this thing. And you can see all the supports are very short. So we think the beauty of this print is it's going to allow a lot of open space underneath, that we might be able to set this up to run the camera off a battery, or we could set up the car itself to pick up track power to supply power for the camera. There you can see the lightning infill. It's just enough to support the next layer. So now Roxy gets the task of removing all of the supports again. And as you can see, it's not real difficult to remove these supports. It's just kind of tedious work. But Roxy's doing a good job. Just a pair of needle nose pliers. You pull most of this right out. And again, the only area that we really need to make sure is fairly smooth is the area that's resting directly on the perimeter of the car itself. And we'll save all of the debris that we're pulling off. I think we can use this a little later. We can paint it up and add some rust effects and be able to use it as scrap in a load, or we can use it as a pile of metal debris in a scrap yard. But I think there'll be some scenic qualities to saving this stuff. Okay, Roxy contemplating what's the easiest way to remove this inner section. There we go, a little small screwdriver, just peel it right up. And of course, this area doesn't need to be quite as smooth, but we still want to get as much of the supports off as we can. And of course, Dad's got to get his 2 cents in. A little light sanding, a little cleanup, and this thing's going to be ready to go. So far, so good. That fits really well. And drops right on top of the card. Nice and stable. Good job, Roxy. So here's the big difference. Our previous tool that we made for this sat on the gondola, and then it was pulled by the locomotive, so you saw over the top of the locomotive and the roof and hood of the locomotive. This time we're pushing the gondola around with the loco, so it's almost a cab view of what we would see. And I think we like this better. So here we're working our way around the outer loop, on past the feeder line, heading towards our grain elevator. Across the swing bridge and heading around to the bridge, the mountain and tunnel. So I'm thinking that we're going to need to go inside the tunnel through the access hatch and go ahead and paint the inside black to try and darken that up a little bit better. So now we're going to see how this looks riding on the middle loop. As the SP pushes it across the swing bridge, heading towards the elevator and around past the yard. Swing around past the flour mill. There's our UP. I sure like the way the backdrop looks coming in. The mountains look pretty awesome. And here we're coming into our mountain and portals again. Through the tunnel we should meet the UP on the other side of the bridge. There it is. Wow. That's really fun. What a great view. And there we can see our BNSF running on the inner loop. And I think we're going to go ahead and try that inner loop too with the car. And here we're trying the inner loop. Well, this mountain is going to be a great scene. And we're heading up the 2% incline. So we can come on around the curve and out onto the peninsula. And back across the swing bridge. So there you go.
We got into this camera car,
got it designed, sliced, and printed, and we were able to run it around the track, and we're really excited about the video we were able to take.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Works great now.
Mm-hmm.
But with the little sideline job out of the way, we're going to get back to this mountain now. We want to start plastering this weekend so we can get rid of all the rest of this pink. So in the meantime, you guys have a good time working on your layouts, running your trains.
Make sure you like and subscribe so you're notified of our next video.
And we'll see you back here again on Getting Back on Track with Steve
And Roxy.
Bye, all.
Guys.